Hi, I'm Dr. Karen Curry Parker. Welcome to this week's Quantum Human Design Energy Forecast. This is the energy forecast for the week starting on Monday, March the 3rd. So first of all, let me just start by saying happy March. I can't believe you've already made it to March. This is almost the midpoint of the creative quarter that we're in. And I want to bring us back to remembering that there are 4 creative quarters in the Quantum Human Design year. Each quarter sets us up to do the work of creating whatever it is we intend to create over the course of a creative cycle, which lasts a year. So in this creative quarter, we are working on creating the emotional frequencies or the quantum energy field of information necessary to sustain our vision for what it is that we want to build and manifest over the arc of this year. So we're in a theme, a season that is very emotional, and those emotions, when we interpret them through the lens of the shadow, can be very reactive, they can be very dramatic, they can be very much all about the feelings, right? The human feelings. That's one level of how that energy works. But if we go to a higher level of how this energy works, this is a frequency of energy that is all about sustaining the faith, the positive expectation that whatever it is you're envisioning will come true. And so this sets us up to not only have an entire season of working with emotional energies, it also sets us up to really have to explore deeply the journey between reacting and fear versus intentional action and faith. Now, the key, if you will, the skeleton key to this entire equation lies in telling a story about who you are and how you are, what you're capable of, and what you deserve that matches your positive expectations or your faith. That's kind of the entrance point. And of course, one of the key things in this storytelling process and in this emotional self-regulation process is mindset. What are you thinking? What's stored up here in the context of the story you're telling yourself and the world about who you are and how you are? Which brings us to the energy forecast for this week, because this week is a week that can be potentially very mental. We are being invited this week to explore consciousness, to explore what thoughts and themes are we having. We start this week with the sun highlighting the gate 63, which is a gate where we are opening up to new possibilities. This is the energy that actually starts the scientific process. So we're curious, we're thinking about what's true, what's not true, is it possible, what else is possible. The earth grounds us in the 64, which is a very expansive, holistic, creative energy. This is the right hemisphere of the brain that is all about getting big ideas and seeing new possibilities, not always with the instructions, but just, with the intent of stirring up our imagination and our possibility thinking. Now, these two energies in the shadow can be doubt, fear, and confusion. And certainly when we look at the collective energy of what's going on the planet right now, it certainly makes sense that a lot of what we see in the arena is doubt, fear, confusion, and suspicion of ourselves, suspicion of each other. And certainly that sets us up to be in a space potentially of tension, or in a space of feeling like we have to defend our position or rationalize our position. And certainly it can be a time when we can get really up here in our head. We're well trained to use our mind to figure things out, to try to be reasonable and rational and find the answers up here in this beautiful noggin of ours. But that's not really the highest potential for how to use the mind. If we look at the way the mind works through the energy field and through the body, we see that the purpose of the mind is not to figure things out, okay? Is not to figure things out. The purpose of the mind is to stimulate our imagination, to stimulate dreaming, to stimulate the ideas that could relate to or catalyze new possibilities, new options. The purpose of the mind is to trigger in the body a creation of neurotransmitters that in turn stimulate a specific frequency of emotional energy. So here's just an example. If I say to you the word money, I'm just going to say the word money. And I want you for just a moment to think about money. As you are thinking about money, here's what's happening inside your body on a physiological level. Your brain is now telling your personal story about money. That might be a great story about money. That might be a fear-riddled story about money. It might be an anxious story about money. Maybe you're worried about the future and money. That story about money that you are storing in your body is causing your brain to produce a storm of photons, a storm of light. Those photons, in turn, are causing your brain to produce neurotransmitters. Those neurotransmitters, in turn, are stimulating in your body a specific frequency of emotional energy, an emotional reaction. Now, that emotional reaction is going to be in alignment with the story you're telling about money. So if your story about money is great, then your body's producing positive emotions around money. If your story around money is maybe a little bit more stressful, then that story is creating an emotional reaction that can be rooted in stress or fear. The stories we tell, the things we dream about, the things we imagine trigger physiological responses in the body that create emotional frequencies. Now, those emotional frequencies are either going to tune the heart into a state of coherence, which is a highly aligned, highly creative state that leaves us open to seeing new possibilities and new options, or it's going to trigger in us a low grade, or maybe even a high grade in some cases, fight or flight response, a stress response. What determines the kind of response you're going to be experiencing and the quality of the creative energy you can access is going to be your story, the story you're telling about whatever it is you're encountering in the world. And so this week, as we begin this week, we are potentially reactivating old stories of trauma, of fear response, of lack, of suspicion, of confusion. Or we can use this opportunity to encounter the world, meet the world where it's at. We can't always change the outer expressions in the moment, but we can change our inner response to it. We can look at what's happening and say, this is not what I want. This is not in alignment with the vision that I have for myself and for the world. And to take a pause in those encounters with the world and dream, think, stop, pause, and imagine what else is possible. What other options are available? And it doesn't matter, and this is important, it doesn't matter that you have to know what the answer is to those possibilities. You don't have to figure out how to make those possibilities happen. It just means that the very first step in that creative process, which is the step we're engaged in right now, is to create the energy field, the emotional frequency that matches what you're dreaming of. So we can use the energy this week to dream and use the power of our dreams to shift and change our emotional response and to create inside of ourselves an emotional response that matches what it is we're really wanting to build in the world. That's an energy that requires intention. That's an energy that requires a pause. It's an energy that requires us to regulate ourselves and to not instantly drop into reactive patterns of fear or lack or defensiveness or othering of others or comparing or any of those low-grade trauma responses that we have sometimes when we take stock of what's going on in the world and we get scared and we feel powerless. You're not powerless. You're not powerless. And the power that you have, the ultimate power that you have, is to regulate what goes on up here so that you shift your energy and put yourself in a position to see from that creative lens that you've stimulated inside of yourselves other options, other possibilities, other cues and clues to the exact next right step that you need to take to be creating whatever it is you're intending to create with your life. Now, midweek we shift from the gate, sun highlighting the gate 63, to the sun highlighting the gate to 22. This is the gate of surrender. The earth midweek grounds us in the gate 47, which is the gate of mindset. So we're not out of the head midweek, but we're moving into the possibility that if we regulate the power of our thoughts, if we regulate what we think about and how we think about what we think about, and we regulate the story we tell ourselves about what we deserve and what we're capable of, if we can manage to regulate ourselves and we let go and we trust the process and we don't get all concerned and freaked out because we don't know what's next, we don't know what to do next, but we simply hold the energy and we wait and see what shows up. If we operate and create from that place and we surrender, then the next right step reveals itself. We'll be given access to all the resources and information we need to take whatever that next right step is in the manifesting process. So that's kind of the big overview of what we're working with this week. Of course, we're still working with the new moon energy, highlighting the gate 37, the gate of harmony, which is a place where in the shadow, there's a potential for war and fighting. Peace and the opposite of peace are all in the same information field. What creates is our focus, where we put our attention and energy. So if we're focused on fear and lack, then we create the tension that potentially creates war and fighting or lack of peace. But if we create, if we focus on unity and expansion of resources, that's what we talked about last week, and we start to recognize where we have versus where we have not, then we can create a different energy field that allows us to find unity and access and create from peace rather than from lack and war. Now, I bring this up because later on this month we have a full moon and an eclipse that's going to be highlighting similar energies, not the same energy, similar energies. So we have this entire month where there's still a lot of tension, a lot of potential for fighting, and a lot of questions about sustainability and access to resources and equitability. And I want to just remind you that the key to creating something better is here. And it's not in figuring it out, it's in the telling of the story you're holding about who you are, what you deserve, and what you're capable of. And I'm going to keep bringing you back to that again and again and again this month, because it's so easy when we drop into those reactive places to forget that we can self-regulate by managing what we think about, what we dream about, by reminding ourselves to stay strong in a story that is worthy of what we were born, the person we were born to be in this lifetime. So I'm bringing this up because one of the other things that's coming up this week is that Venus is now retrograde. And Venus is going retrograde, highlighting the gate 21, which comes off the top of the will center. And that energy in quantum human design is called self-regulation. Now, in the shadow, this energy can feel like a need to control. And you can see if we've got the theme of surrender playing, and then Venus is highlighting the theme of control, you can see where we've got a conflict this week about who's in charge of ourselves, who's in charge of around us. And certainly it can feel powerless or feeling like we have to fight for our power in order to be in control. I want to remind you that you might not always be able to control what's out here in the beginning, when you encounter it, but you can always control what's in here. You know, I always keep, right now especially, I've been going back a lot to the paraphrase quotation from Viktor Frankl that, you know, the only thing that you can control is the space between stimulus and response. And when you learn to control that space inside of yourself, then you experience freedom. No one can take that away from you. No one can take that away from you. And so as we look at this Venus energy in this retrograde station where we're really having to go deep into what is the source of our blessings, how do we craft for ourselves, how do we regulate for ourselves our own source and source of our blessings, the source of our expansion, we see that in this Venus retrograde cycle, that so much of what we're here to learn right now is about how do we regulate ourselves? How do we stand strong in our value? We talked about that a lot last week as well. How do we hold true to our own inner sense of self-worth? How do we value ourselves enough to regulate ourselves, to, instead of reacting and buying into the old stories, how do we tell a better story about what we deserve and what we're capable of, so that we can create that story in the outer plane, so that when we encounter these old manifestations of old stories that maybe aren't worthy of you, how do you go back and tell a better story? And that takes practice. It takes consciously pausing and disrupting the story. And it takes, honestly, a practice of having a spiritual practice. And so I certainly would invite you, as we enter into this Venus retrograde cycle with all this other tension and all this other stuff going on, to take time to sit down on a daily basis and connect with Source, connect with that thing that is bigger than you, that you are so much an intimate and integral part of, and remind yourself on the daily, you're here for a reason. Your story matters. You are a unique and vital, once-in-a-lifetime cosmic event. You're here for a reason. You are precious. You are inherently valuable because you exist. And because you exist and you're valuable, you deserve everything, including a world, an outer manifestation of a world where your value is reflected back to you each and every day. That's what I got for you this week. Some important information about regulating your mind and your thoughts. Keep practice, pay attention to what your thoughts are. Don't get defeated when it feels hard. Take creative pauses, maybe unplug from social media if you need to, if it starts to get despairing or overwhelming. Go outside, be in nature, enjoy the season that we're in. Take some time to read, stay inspired, stay connected to each other in community. Community is one of our greatest resources that we need to be tapping into on a regular basis. And in the meantime, have a really great week. Take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you next week.